Hey y'all! Sorry for missing last week. I was sick and my voice sounded funny, so I couldn't record. And I was fine, and then I have a little something still, but I think that I sound mostly okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and keep reading so we don't have a big break. Anyway, so we last left Lyric and Runa with chapter 26, where they decided that they were going to do the ritual and summon the dragons. So let's just get into it. All right, chapter 27, Runa. Runa sat on a ledge of sun-drenched rock, legs dangling over the edge, and stared into the valley below. After they'd decided to go ahead with the ritual, the Sareni had lingered inside the room, unwilling to leave her and Lyric alone. Though they didn't say it aloud, Runa suspected they were worried Kaya wouldn't keep her agreement with the Ayanarans. Why else was everyone on edge? Surely it wasn't only because of the impending ritual. What did Runa and Lyric mean to Lairdie, Sashala, and Taith? She could understand Elodin's attachment, but the others? Unable to stand the palpable tension in the air or Kel's tormented eyes after a sleepless night and solemn morning, Runa had shoved her way outside and started walking. She'd picked a direction randomly, weaving between trees and climbing rocks, focusing on the feel of her muscles propelling her forward, and the movement of air in and out of her lungs. She felt someone follow her, but didn't look to see who, and they stayed far enough back that Runa pushed them from her mind. She'd only stopped, sweat trickling down her back, when the land abruptly opened up onto a large rocky ledge, impassable where it jetted over a sea of trees below. She'd taken a deep gulp of air, unraveling as her emotions bubbled up through her chest, until she was crying for no reason at all. In front of Runa, the forest stretched unbroken, the thick tree canopy lush and green. She could see a waterfall off to the side and hear the rush of water tumbling a great distance, but wherever it led was hidden by the trees. There was a river down there somewhere, carrying the water away, but she couldn't see it. Runa wasn't sure what drove her to the edge, but she'd sat precariously high, imagining what would happen if she fell off. Would she float like a leaf spiraling down? Would it feel like flying? Would she hit the trees, her body breaking as it fell, or would she tumble weightlessly until she hit the forest floor far below? What happened then? Would she go to the Vale? Would it feel like before? "Are you thinking of ending it already?" Eleonora asked, her voice sharp and caustic. Runa wiped her cheeks and stared out across the trees. "I shouldn't be surprised." "We're going to summon the old ones," Runa said, her tone flat, unaffected. Eleonora shifted. Despite being unable to see her, Runa knew she was curious, surprised. "Haven't you been listening?" Runa asked. "We're going to do the ritual, the one Rakarn attempted." "A rather bold gesture," Eleonora said. "The dragons may be allies, but you also risk becoming their attendants. It's better to fight your own battles, girl." "What?" Runa asked, frowning at the air. "I'm not calling them for Rendashar. We're going to ask them to cleanse the taint." Eleonora's mood shifted to tense brooding. "Don't you care?" Runa asked. "If Rendashar melts into the Sea of Screams?" "We will never be diminished," Eleonora said. Runa gritted her teeth. "Is there a reason I shouldn't trust Lenadara or the Ayanarans? Is there a reason I shouldn't do the ritual?" "It'd be better if you had something to offer the three," Eleonora said, absently. "So you're not in their debt. You don't want to make alliances from a place of weakness." "I have nothing that would interest an old one," Runa said. "That's unfortunate." Eleonora seemed to shrug. "What could I offer anyway?" "Well, you could offer them the kingdom, though they'll probably simply take it. We're their brood, after all." "The what?" "Rendashar?" Runa asked. "Yes. They've been gone from the world for a long time. You could renew your oaths." "I don't speak for Rendashar. King Rakarn does." "You'd have to kill him, obviously, and your mother, unless she abdicates. But if the people knew of her treachery—" Runa's mouth dropped open, horrified by her ancestor's suggestion. "I'm not murdering anyone." "You asked for my advice. I hope you survive it, the summoning. I'd hate to have wasted all this time on you." "That's nice of you to say," Runa said darkly. Eleonora made a non-committal sound and disappeared, leaving Runa to herself. Runa sat for a time, irritated by the lack of help from her ancestor. The sun started to shift, the day droning on into late afternoon. "I should get back," she thought. Rising slowly, Runa stretched her back and arms, then turned and walked into the trees. She was so familiar with walking unguided through forest land that it was easy to retrace her steps. As Runa walked, she listened to the Aenaran forest and found it mostly silent save for the movement and calls of birds. She didn't hear or see another person, and if she hadn't known the village was ahead of her, she could have believed she was first to walk here. She caught no hint to the person who'd shadowed her to the cliff. Had it been one of the Sireni, Sashala, or Taith, or had it been an Aenaran? Runa paused by a boulder to stare up at a tall tree, its trunk thick and skirted with white mushrooms like enormous lacy frills. Studying the fungi, she heard the murmur of voices. She tilted her head, listening. Was that Lenadara's voice? Moving closer to the rock, Runa shifted along its edge until she could peer around to the other side. Lenadara was there, standing with her back to Runa and talking to an older man. The man was similarly robed with long brown hair and a neatly trimmed beard. You don't think they'll listen, do you? The man said, despite the old stories and their sacrifices during the demon war. It's been thousands of years since they concerned themselves with our affairs, Lenadara said. I think it's dangerous to assume they'll feel obliged to help. What if they come and decide to give in to their bestial nature? What would we do then? Appeal to their kindness? No, we must be ready. The man shifted his weight, looking uncertain. What guidance has Aya given? She promised their submission. Are you sure it's worth the risk? The man asked. The words are Valanian. The cost could be... I'll do what I must, Lenadara said, cutting him off. The man looked like he might argue, and then he nodded, stroking his fingers over his beard. It's fortunate we learned of the girl's existence. Aya is all-knowing. If Again had not come to us... Lenadara and the man began to walk away, their words too quiet to overhear. Runa frowned as she watched them leave and moved back from the boulder. It sounded like the Aenarans were not as confident in the Old One's willingness to help as Lenadara had implied. How exactly could their mother tree promise the dragon submission? And what was Valanian? Runa had never heard of it before. It's powerful blood magic, Eleonora said inside her head. An adaptation of celestial, or a bastardization of it, depending on your sentiments. Runa blinked. Blood magic? I would not have expected that from the Aenarans, she said, thinking of what little she knew of their axioms. You're calling dragons, Eleonora said, her tone crisp and impatient. That's not a simple thing. And celestial? What's that? Eleonora sighed. Your mother should be ashamed of your education. It's a language for magic. What, you thought everyone uses dragon runes? Even those who are not of the bloodline? Runa flushed. Eleonora's scorn like thorns against her skin. She longed to ask more, but anger was rolling red-hot through her. Her nails scraped across her palms as she tightened her hands into fists. I need to speak with Lyric. When Runa returned to the room she shared with her sister, she found Taith and Seshala loitering outside. They nodded as she passed, apparently left on guard duty by Eladin. Lyric and Kel were inside, reclining on the cushions in each other's arms. Their heads were bent close, Lyric murmuring something as Kel shook his head. Runa cleared her throat, smiling thinly when they glanced up at her, startled. I overheard Lenadara talking with another priest, Runa said. Lyric shifted against Kel's chest. What did you hear? She's not as confident in the Old One's help as she implied. Runa picked a cushion and plopped down onto it, shoving her skirt out of the way. She thinks they'll fail, Kel asked with alarm. No, she said the mother tree would ensure their submission. Their submission? Lyric raised both eyebrows. What does that mean? Runa shrugged. The mother tree was created by Ethathera. Maybe it's more powerful than the old ones. Lyric tipped her head back to look into Kel's face. He was frowning, his eyes dark and troubled. In theory, I suppose, Kel said reluctantly. There aren't many stories about the mother tree beyond what happened at the end of the demon war. What happened? Lyric asked. The tree sacrificed a branch, not a physical one, but a connection to whatever realm Verlaine conceived her demons. At least that's the story they taught at the Radiant Hall. To trap her there after the demon war? Runa asked. She frowned, thinking of the fallen god Verlaine. Kel nodded. Then perhaps the mother tree is powerful enough, Lyric said. There's something else, Runa said. The priest said the ritual is in Valanian. Valanian? As in... Lyric began. Kel swore, nearly dumping Lyric over as he bolted upright. The demon language! He twisted, gripping Lyric's arms. Don't do the ritual, Lyric. Kel, I already told you. They're going to do blood magic, Runa said, drawing Lyric's eyes. That's what Valanian is. Lyric opened her mouth, then closed it. She chewed distractedly on her lip, pushing off Kel's chest to sit up. Runa opened her mouth, but Lyric held up a hand. She tilted her head to the side, listening. After a moment, Lyric looked back at her, her green eyes refocusing. It's not inherently evil, Lyric said. That's what Gandara says. It's dangerous, taxing on your body, but with Verlaine gone from the world, the risk is different. The demigod can't possess you or exact a price beyond energy loss, exhaustion, and whatever blood is required for the spell. At least that's what Gandara has heard. She never used Valanian herself when she was alive. Kell groaned and slammed his fist into the pillows. Do you hear yourself lie? He asked, growling out her name. Whatever blood is required? Lyric's eyes narrowed in annoyance. I didn't say it wasn't dangerous, but what part of this whole situation isn't? We're not the ones performing the ritual. We're not taking on the same danger as Lena Dara is. But if the burden were mine and mine alone, I'd still willingly offer myself to save our family, to save you, to save Aerith. It doesn't change anything. Her jaw set stubbornly, and she shifted her heated stare to Runa. Right? Runa shook her head, feeling uneasy. It does lie. Lena Dara is withholding information. What else isn't she telling us? Lyric scowled, then doubt crept into her eyes, and she nodded. It is troubling, but if she's taking the danger on herself... Is she? Kell asked. I've read about Valanian lie. It's unpredictable, chaotic. It was created by Verlaine. I tried to find a practitioner once to remove my tattoo. He touched his throat. You did? Lyric asked, eyes wide. He couldn't do it. He wasn't strong enough, but there was something wrong with him. He looked damaged. We should confront her, Runa said. If Lena Dara continues to lie, we'll know we can't trust her. She may be limiting what she tells us because she sees us as children, or... Her reasons for the ritual are not what she claims, Lyric said. Runa stood up and brushed off her skirt. Walking to the door, she stuck her head through the vines and found a young Aenaran woman talking to Taith. Can you fetch the High Priestess? Runa asked. We'd like to speak with her. The girl nodded, her cheeks flushing, and dashed off into the trees. Finally, Seychella said. She's been out here flirting with Taith. I don't think his head can get any bigger. Taith rolled his eyes, grinning. Lips quirking, Runa ducked back inside. Lyric and Kell were whispering to each other again, so she sat down by the door and looked at her hands, focusing on a scratch across her knuckles. When Lena Dara arrived, she looked relaxed and happy, her eyes untroubled. Ashlyn told me you'd like to speak with me, the High Priestess said, voice bright. We've been preparing for tonight. Yes, Runa said. We have a few questions. Yes? The ritual is in Valanian. Isn't that dangerous magic? Lena Dara's brow twitched, and she laced her hands together. It can be, she said, but with Verlaine bound and gone, unable to touch our world, the risk is just a physical one. I'll shield you as much as I'm able. My fellow priests and I will perform the ritual on your behalf. The price will be mine. You're wondering how we found out, Runa said, watching Lena Dara's face. I did not want to burden you with worrying about our safety. Runa snorted, but by the look on Lyric's face, her sister seemed receptive to Lena Dara's explanation. There's no need to shield us from the truth, Lyric said. We want to know the risks. I overheard you, Runa said, watching the High Priestess's face. Oh? Lena Dara's eyebrow twitched, a tiny flicker of movement. You're not certain the old ones will listen. We do have our concerns, Lena Dara said patiently. Her face looked serene, immune to Runa's attempts to get under her skin. Though the ritual itself is on our shoulders, it is you and Lyric who will speak with the old ones. Regrettably, we don't have time to prepare you for such a meeting properly. The dragons may be cautious considering your youth. I didn't want to overwhelm you, so I thought it best if I kept our worries private. I apologize. You're concerned they won't listen because we're young, Runa asked skeptically. That hadn't been what she thought Lena Dara and the male priest were discussing. It's a possibility, Lena Dara said. The old ones may be confused about how you summon them, given your age, but we'll be close by and offer our support. I hope you haven't changed your mind about participating in the ritual. We cannot do it without you, and we must do it tonight. Runa glanced at her sister. The High Priestess actually seemed sincere. It wouldn't be the first time someone older had thought to shield them. Still, something felt wrong. Lyric looked at Kell, who was scowling, his eyes focused on Lena Dara's face. What if you speak to Aya? Lena Dara said. Perhaps she can put your mind at ease. Surprise flashed across all their faces. I thought she only speaks to you, Runa said. I think she'd wish to assure you. She can show you why the ritual is urgent. Share her visions. Would that ease your minds? Lyric blinked, curiosity drawing the doubt from her face. Yes, that would help. Curious, but still suspicious, Runa gave a sharp nod. Why hadn't Lena Dara suggested this before? Though she had doubts about the high priestess, surely they could trust the echo of a god? Lenadara beamed. Wonderful. If you permit it, I'll have dinner brought to you and baths prepared. You, of course, can give your final decision after you've communed with the mother, but we will prepare everything so we are ready to begin the ritual. All right, Lyric said. Is there anything we need to learn, something we need to do or say during the ritual? If we do it, Runa said under her breath. You will not need to speak during the ritual, Lenadara said. Your challenge will be to remain open and to accept the power as it moves through you. Have you tried the ritual before? Runa asked. Lenadara's eyes snapped back to hers. What? The high priestess blinked, seeming confused. No, we have not. Runa stared at her, uncertain if she was lying. She couldn't read Lenadara, but the priestess actually seemed confused by her question, as if it was something she'd never considered. Lenadara looked at Cal and frowned. I'm not sure you should be present tonight, she said. Considering what Rakarn did to you, it may be difficult to watch Lyric take part. Cal looked at Lyric and grabbed her hand. I won't let you do this alone. Is that wise? Runa asked, watching the tattoo on his neck. Is any of this? Cal shot back. Lenadara stood up. I'll ask Ashlan to bring your food. Chapter 28. Runa. A simple dinner was brought to them after Lenadara left. Flatbread covered in green sauce, goat cheese, and fire-roasted vegetables. After sharing the meal in the seclusion of their room, several Ayanaran women came at dusk to take Runa and Lyric to soak in secluded hot springs, while Kel went in search of Elodin and the others. Attended by the women while they soaked in the warm blue-green pools, Runa was unnerved by the reverential shine in their eyes. It was like they were all holding their breath, waiting for her and Lyric to do something marvelous. Sharing uncomfortable smiles, Runa and Lyric bathed in silence. After they'd soaked in the deep water for nearly half an hour, their attendant stepped forward with towels. Runa and Lyric were helped out of the warm pool and dried, then covered in oil that smelled of nuts and flowers. The Ayanarans gave them gray robes and led them barefoot back to their room, where they combed out their hair with wooden combs. Is this part of the ritual? Lyric asked one of the women. You must be cleansed before we seek the mother's blessing, one of them answered. Has the tree ever spoke to you? Runa asked, wincing as the comb scraped across her scalp. Never. The woman's voice was hushed. That is an honor for our high priestess. And what a blessing for you that you will hear Aya's voice. I wonder what she sounds like. She flushed as if embarrassed by her words and stepped back, clutching the comb against her chest. Runa stood and smoothed her hands across the soft robe enfolding her body. They left her hair loose around her shoulders, and it felt heavy against her back. It's time, a dark-haired woman said, gesturing at the door. Glancing at Lyric, Runa pushed through the vines. Lenadara was standing outside with the bearded priest beside her. She traded her robe for a black one with a deep hood that she'd pulled over her hair. Two others accompanied the priests, an elderly white-haired man with unsettling gray eyes, and a middle-aged woman with short gray curls and a hooked nose. To the Ayanaran's left waited Cal. He'd bathed and was wearing green trousers and a long shirt, unlaced at the throat. Beside him stood Elodin, Laerdy, Sishala, and Taith, all wearing their familiar Sareni clothes, and still looking ill at ease. You're ready? Lenadara asked, meeting Runa's eyes. Lyric grabbed Runa's hand, and she felt her sister's nervous pulse beneath her fingers. To speak to Aya, yes, Runa said. Lenadara inclined her head. Elodin stepped up beside the high priestess, muscles flexing in his arms, and gave the Ayanarans a challenging look. We're coming too, he said decisively. Kel, Laerdy, Sishala, and Taith formed around him, looking dangerous despite holding no weapons. You may be present, but Aya will only speak to Lyric and Runa. Lenadara's eyes flicked to Runa. After, if we begin the ritual, you must not interfere. This is crucial. Once it begins, we cannot stop it, no matter what happens. Elodin looked at Runa and Lyric. By the expression on his face, Kel had told him their concerns about Lenadara. Agreed, but the girls will decide if the ritual begins. Of course, Lenadara said. Now, if you'd follow me. Runa, Lyric, and the others followed the Ayanaran priests away from the village. They climbed a steep hill, passing beneath a dense cover of leaves that grew ever more tangled until shadows surrounded them. Runa felt the skin on her neck prickle, sensing unseen eyes on her back. She tightened her grip on Lyric's hand, and for several breaths all Runa could hear was the thud of her heart in her ears and the ragged pull of air into her lungs. The foliage lightened, and they stepped inside a large clearing. Bright green moss covered the ground, and pale purple flowers adorned every bush around its edge. In front of them was an enormous tree with large looping branches that curved up into the leafy ceiling above. Thousands of diamond-shaped leaves covered the tree, the colors ranging from deep green to dark purple. A woman, plump with a luminous umber face and large green eyes, smiled beatifically from beside the tree. She was robed like Lanadara and held a staff in her hand. Beside her was Theo, the horned man, grinning as his eyes fell on Runa. He had a bowl in his hands, filled with pearlescent liquid that sloshed dangerously close to its edge as he winked. Nodding at Theo and the woman, Lanadara knelt in front of the tree and pressed her palms against its dark gray trunk, her fingers splayed on whorls that covered every inch of the uneven wood. "Kneel beside me, please," she said, not looking over her shoulder. Runa eyed Lyric, and together they knelt on Lanadara's left, still holding hands. The ground felt cool beneath Runa's knees, and she stared at the high priestess as she closed her eyes. Was that the shape of a face above Lanadara's hands? "The mother is pleased by your presence," the high priestess said, turning her head. "Place your hands on her like this." Anticipation fluttering inside her stomach, Runa pressed her hand against the tree. The bark felt rough and warm against her skin. Swallowing, she prepared to listen to the Ayanaran's god. "Aya?" she thought. Nothing happened. Runa looked at Lyric, who gave a small shrug, her brows knotted over her eyes. "I don't hear anything," Runa said, looking at Lanadara. The high priestess seemed confused and looked at the tree, flattening her fingers against it. The consternation grew on her face. Swallowing, Lanadara glanced back at the other priests. The woman with the staff frowned down at Theo, who returned her gaze with confusion. He shrugged, nearly spilling the liquid again. Suspicion narrowed Runa's eyes. Had Lanadara lied? Why did she look so shaken? From the looks passing between the Ayanarans, they'd expected their tree to speak. Dropping her hands, Lanadara stood, her face smoothing out, unreadable. "I apologize, but it seems the mother has been called away." Runa stood up. She glanced at Eladin, who was frowning and watching the trees. "The agreement was we'd speak with Aya," Runa said. "I'm afraid that's not possible," Lanadara said. "I regret I cannot soothe all your worries, but we must continue. What I've told you is true. The dragons are the only way to save Aerith before the taint destroys her. We cannot wait another year." "No," Runa said. "If you've lied about your tree—" "I have not lied," Lanadara snapped, her calm shattering. Anger filled her face and her eyes blazed. "We will continue. I won't let arrogant children decide if our world dies. Take them." Whirling, Runa saw green-clad archers step out from the trees, bows drawn and pointed at her and Lyric. She raised her hand, sparks sizzling between her fingers, but Lyric caught her wrist. "No," her sister gasped. Runa hissed, following Lyric's gaze. Kel, Eladin, and the other Sareni were on their knees with arrows pointed at their heads. Laerdy, eyes furious, had a hand to his forehead, blood dripping between his fingers. "I thought you need our consent, freely given," Lyric said, voice shaking. Lanadara looked composed again, confident, superior. "And you will give it, or your companions will die." Lyric's eyes filled with panic, and she looked at Kel. His face was stricken, his body leaning towards her as if he wanted to grab Lyric and run. "I don't know if—" Theo began. Lanadara silenced him with a look, and Theo looked uncomfortably down at his hands. "I regret force is required," Lanadara said. "We truly wished to be allies, and thought you would see the importance of what we're doing. I know how this seems, but the ritual is too important. It's a harsh truth, but your lives mean nothing compared to the millions of souls the taint will kill. It's time." She gestured at an opening in the trees. Runa looked at the other priests. There was no hesitation in their eyes. They didn't care what Lanadara was doing, or seemed concerned about her murderous threat. Whatever surprise they'd felt when Aya had not spoken had been swallowed by utter devotion to their high priestess. "What do we do?" Lyric whispered, clutching Runa's hand. Runa was angry enough to set the forest on fire, to burn that confident smile off Lanadara's face. But what then? Was the priestess lying about the taint? "Do you think she's lying?" Runa hissed. "Do you think the taint has spread?" "I think it has," Lyric whispered. "She believes what she's told us. They all do." Runa bared her teeth, glaring. As much as she hated the high priestess, she couldn't see another way to save their father, their world, or even Lyric beside her. "Then we continue. Better that than dying here." Watched closely by the bow-holding Ayanarans, Runa and Lyric followed Lanadara and her priests back into the thick forest. They walked for several minutes, climbing up until another large clearing opened ahead of them, exposed to the darkening sky. Lit torches created a circle several steps in from the field's edge, and in the center someone had raked a small circle of black sand. Around the sand sat 4 earthen bowls. Elladan, Kell, Laertes, Sashala, and Taith were forced to stand in a line outside the torches, each watched by a green-clad archer. The rest of the archers fanned out to encircle the clearing, their bows ready and their eyes on Runa and Lyric. "Walk onto the circle of sand," Lenadara said. She was no longer asking nicely, merely giving commands she expected them to obey. Runa's fingers itched, and she had to swallow the desire to call fire, to fight, to flee. Instead, she walked with Lyric towards the black sand. Behind them, Lenadara and her priest stepped inside the ring of torches. "Are you sure about this?" Runa asked, her voice low. "We could still run. Figure something else out." Lyric eyed the archers, then looked at Kell. Runa followed her gaze and saw that Kell's face was a tormented mask. He stood at Elladan's side, as tension filled as a taut bowstring, and for a moment she thought he might dash across the clearing, priests and archers be damned. "I don't think that's an option anymore," Lyric said quietly. "I pray this isn't a mistake, that I haven't misread her." She glowered at the high priestess. "Not that we have another choice. We can't fight it. For Eris' sake, for mother, for father." Gritting her teeth, Runa nodded. She eyed the bowls as they passed and saw that one held a collection of sticks and dried moss, another water, the third dirt, and in the fourth was a flute. When they stepped onto the sand, Runa glanced down in surprise. It felt silky beneath her feet. Holding hands, Runa and Lyric faced each other as the priests formed a circle around them. The priests picked up the bowls, Lenadara choosing the ones with sticks and moss. "Aya, Great Mother, we call upon your guidance." Lenadara's voice was loud and firm. "Walk with us this evening. Know our hearts are pure, our purpose true. I call upon fire." Fire flared in the bowl in her hands, the sticks and moss catching the light. "Let it illuminate that which is hidden." Runa's skin tingled as she felt Lenadara's magic permeate the air. She frowned. She hadn't known she was a mage. How had Lenadara called fire without speaking a single rune word? "I call upon water," the bearded priest said. The water hissed in his bowl, steam rising from its surface and flicking little drops of water into the air. "Let it cleanse that which is clouded." The gray-haired woman raised her bowl of dirt. "I call upon earth," she said, "for it is to which we shall all return." "Is this the ritual grandfather did?" Lyric whispered. "What does this have to do with the old ones?" "I call upon air," the gray-eyed man said. He lifted the flute and played 4 short, haunting notes that lingered in the air. "May it fill our ears and dispel lies." "I don't know." Runa watched as the priests set down their bowls. "The dragons are tied to the elements." A light breeze had picked up and it tugged on her hair. The torches flickered and sputtered. Runa glanced at Kell and the Sireni, clumped together outside the torchline. The priests raised their arms out to each side, fingers splayed and stretching towards each other. They began to speak in an unfamiliar language. It sounded similar to the guttural dragon runes Eleonora had taught her, but the dialect was smoother and oilier, more seductive. Runa's skin tingled, simultaneously feeling too hot and cold. Sweat trickled down the small of her back. The wind picked up speed, and Runa gasped as it became a solid, rushing thing that whipped around them in a circle, spinning and separating into visible threads of air. It distorted the faces of the chanting priests and Kell and the Sireni beyond. "Rue," Lyric said, her voice shaky. Runa locked her fingers around Lyric's, meeting her wide, scared eyes. "Something's wrong." She stared at her sister. Something terrible was going to happen. She could feel it. Icy cold bit her fingers, and Runa yelped as Lyric tore away from her, hands slipping from her grasp. Her sister lifted off the ground. Caught in a column of churning water, Lyric thrashed, her hair floating around her head. Her eyes filled with unrestrained terror. She was going to drown. Screaming, Runa dashed forward, intending to grab her sister and pull her free from the water. She reached out, then screamed as her arm caught fire. Pain exploded over her body, and Runa disappeared into a maelstrom of fire. She was burning, her body awash in searing flame. It crackled and roared. She couldn't see anything but red gold fire. Runa screamed again, or tried to, but there was no air in her lungs. "I'm going to die." Panicked, Runa flailed her arms, trying to run, but she couldn't move. Was she still standing on the ground or caught in the air like Lyric? "You're not going to die, stupid girl." Eleonora's voice, spiteful, disapproving, thundered in Runa's head, shoving aside the blinding pain. "Did you think this would be easy? What an arrogant, foolish child. You are fire. Rendasharan. You're descended from the 3. Take control of it now." "I don't know how," Runa screamed. Her skin was burning, peeling away, exposing her bones. Her blood was boiling. Soon she'd be nothing. Soon she'd be... "It is part of you or it is not." Eleonora shifted, and it felt like she'd pressed her fingernails into Runa's brain, the uncomfortable sensation momentarily displacing the all-consuming pain. Maybe you will die, Eleonora sneered. Maybe you're weak, like your grandfather, like your mother. Eleonora's presence pushed against her, her displeasure a solid, comforting thing, and Runa grabbed it, onto the feeling of her in her words. She would not die with Eleonora watching her, waiting for her to fail. She would not give her that satisfaction. I am fire, Runa thought, trying to shove aside the panic, the pain. I am fire. The fire could not hurt her. She was fire. She had the blood of dragons inside her. She was Runa. She could not be burned. She would not be burned or die at the hands of Ionar and priests. She would not let them kill Lyric. Lyric! Rage seared away the panic, building and rising with familiar strength. Runa was furious with Laenadora, with herself for trusting her. She'd hurt them. She would... Runa realized she no longer felt pain. She could see again. Blinking, she stared at the flames covering her arm. They were not burning her skin, but dancing across it like light upon paper. Runa willed the flames to go out, and they disappeared, winking from existence as if they'd never been. Her skin was smooth, unmarred, and she stared at her hand in wonder, flexing her fingers. She knew she hadn't imagined the pain, the burning, yet she was unharmed. Lyric. Runa jerked her head up, frantically searching for her sister. Had she drowned? Was Lyric dead? And we're going to stop there merely because this video is reaching the mark. But I will be kind and I'm going to record another video continuing on, and I will post that as a separate video just to keep, so you can keep them split up, make it easier to listen to in chunks. But I won't make you wait another week. So thank you for listening. If you want to keep listening, there will be another video after this one. Anyway, all right. I will be back. Bye.